Hello everyone, welcome to episode 54 Bhagavad Gita Simple Understanding. Today we'll be continuing 6th chapter, what we have discussed. So basically 6.4 starts Yada hi nindriyarteshu na karma svanushachyate sarvasankalpa samnyasi yoga rudas taduchyate. When a man ceases to have any attachment either for the objects of senses or for actions and has renounced all thoughts of worldly desires, he is said to have climbed to the heights of yoga. So basically, Krishna today will be explaining about the qualities or the what you can say, the traits of a person who has attained yoga or equilibrium. Okay, so the first point what Krishna discusses here is when a man ceases to have any attachment either for the objects of senses or for actions. When these two things are there, when you say objects of senses, it's like what you see, what you hear, what you taste, the taste, the sensation of the skin, and the sound, the smell, the sight. So these are all basically the senses and sense objects. So as we know, we all are attached to some kind of sense objects. We like to hear beautiful music, we like to hear something which is nice to hear, or we like to speak, or we like to sing, or we like to taste something which is very good. The food is basically the tongue. The main function of the tongue is to taste, right? So the taste, we like to have something very good taste, we like to have some good smell, and also sensation, we like good sensations, we want to feel some senses. So these are the sense objects. So each and every human is attached to his sense objects in some way or the other. The second part what Krishna explains is one should be also detached from the actions. So actions, in the sense, there are various kinds of actions. From morning till evening we all do some kind of actions, and we like to do some kind of actions, and we like not to do some kind of actions. So what Krishna says here is when a man ceases to have any attachment to both the senses, both the sense objects, like to have some good senses, and also not to like. Here both points are important. A person should not be attached for liking something, or should not be detached, or should not be, in the sense, should not be allergic to something. You should be neutral. It comes or goes, but still a person should be neutral and take things as it is. The same thing is applicable to actions also. A person may take some may like some actions to do, but it should not be attached that I will do this kind of actions. Example, you can take a person likes to sit in a nice office, okay, and is attached to the environment in the office and to do work in that particular environment. Again it becomes senses, but is attached. He likes to sit in a place and doesn't like to roam always. That's the office kind of, like admin kind of work, so he's attached to that kind of activities. But if you ask the same person to go out and do some kind of sales activities, to meet people, roam around, go in a traffic, go in the transportation, he may say that I don't like that action to do. So what Krishna means here is a person should not be attached to a particular kind of activity, a particular kind of action. A pujari may say I like to do only a certain kind of activity where I will go to the temple and I'll be clean and then I'll do this pujari activity. But the same person is given some other kind of activity of the god. He says no, I am not into that. I don't like that. I don't consider this as a devotion. I like only doing the puja activity as a pujari activity as my devotion. No. Krishna says that whatever activity has been given, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, whatever, according to your thing, you should be ready to do, and you should be detached from those actions also. You should be ready to do anything for the satisfaction of the God. So that's how the word means free from any attachment to the sense objects and for actions. And continuing, and has renounced all thoughts of worldly desires, he is said to have climbed the heights of yoga. So one thing is we have to be detached, correct? We should not be attached to the senses, but externally we may not do the things of the senses. but our mind may always ponder upon things. For example, we would have experienced a good food in a restaurant. After eating that good food in the restaurant, even though the action is completed, say after 1 week or 10 days, still that the taste and the environment, everything remains in the mind. Okay, that is what is it means. Renounce all thoughts of worldly desires. So after maybe 2 years, 3 years, we may still ponder that, oh, I would want to experience the same experience which I had experienced there in a restaurant or in a pub or whatever it may be. It's a small example I'm giving. This may be applicable to any kind. Whatever luxuries we would have experienced, that carries in our mind, or whatever good things we would have experienced, that we would have carried in the mind, and the mind always wants to get back those things. It always ponders on that thing. That the incident would have been completely gone. The incident would have happened and finished, but still that experience remains in the mind, and the mind always hankers for that experience to come back. For example, a person would have taken up grahastha life and would have had sex. He would have experienced sex life. But when it comes to vanaprastha or sannyasa, there he is not allowed to have sex. Then what happens? Even though he is physically not having any sex, but the mind may always be on that experience, what he had experienced during his grahastha life. His mind will be pondering on the sexual thoughts, the sexual acts which he has done. So this is what Krishna means, that first thing is one should be detached from his objects of senses and for our actions, and also renounce the thoughts of worldly desires, the thoughts which keep coming back. It might be the food, it might be the sexual experience, it might be any object. Okay, the senses, the mind always ponders on them. That shouldn't happen. One should be detached from that. Once he was grahastha, yes, he was having sex, he was having family life, well and good, he was enjoying all family life. But when it comes to sannyasa, he is a lonely person. He has to be self-dependent and not ponder physically or mentally on his past. That's what it means. So such a person who attains that life or that stage is considered to have reached the heights of yoga. Heights in the sense, the different levels of hierarchies of yoga. A learner, a practitioner, an experienced, and a perfectionist. So if you have to go to the perfectionist form, that height, you have to be ready to undergo such changes, such experiences. Continuing 6.5. उदारेदात्मनात्मनां नात्मनात्मसदस्यते आत्मैव आत्मनो बन्धुरात्मैव रिपुरात्मनः. So again, very important shloka we'll be discussing. One should lift oneself by one's own effort and should not degrade oneself. For one's own self is one's friend and one's own self is one's enemy. So here the question is, like, one should lift oneself to one's own efforts and should not degrade oneself. Here what it means is materially, one should not do hard work and lift. That's not the thing spoken here. The matter spoken here is, if you remember in the second chapter we discussed that a human after this life, he may again go to a better human life, or he may degrade to animal life. He may go back to like swine, or he may become an dog, or he may become an amoeba plant, based on his activities in this life, desires in this life. Or if he performs well, he may go to upper status, that is, he may climb, he may go to heaven or whatever, he may enjoy the heavenly pleasures, etc. Or if he is very pure, he gives up all the attachments and no desires, then he may go back to Vaikuntha or Kailasa or XYZ, to Saket or whatever. So this is what is meant here by one should lift oneself by one's own effort. One's own effort, because nobody else can do your sadhana. Nobody else can induce detachment in you. Nobody can induce peace in you. It is our own efforts, our own thinking, our own analysis which makes us get detached from this world, get perfection from this world. For one to go to higher platform of life, either to heaven or Vaikuntha also, one has to do his own efforts, by his own efforts, by putting efforts to get detached from these sufferings, by putting efforts to get detached from the sensual attraction, to get detached from these results of fruits of activities. So all these things will come by one's own effort, once by one's own practice. It doesn't come just like that. But in the process, if a man is not serious and he doesn't put any effort at all in getting detached from this happiness or sorrow, but always keeps indulging, satisfying his senses, satisfying his dear ones, family members, then what happens? He gets degraded. Degraded in the sense, in order to satisfy his sexual desire, he has to satisfy his wife. Generally, in the sense, for a man, once he has to satisfy his wife, then wife has certain demands. She asks, I want this, I want that, give me this money, give me that, give me this facility, that, this. So in order to do that, it may be wife or anybody else also, in the sense of girlfriend, whatever, etc. In order to satisfy a woman, a man has to earn. Now, if he is out of control, if naturally the demands of women are high. Now, in order to satisfy the woman's demand, the man starts going through wrong procedures. He'll start pondering or starts cheating people in order to earn the money, and he does all kinds of these activities. Finally, the result was only to satisfy his close female friend. So in that way, in the process of doing so, he is doing a lot of sinful activities, he is doing some of sinful terms, hence is going to earn sin. Now same thing happens to a woman also. In order to satisfy a man, she has to do so many other things. She may also get into a wrong act. So this is applicable for both man and woman. It's all situational, but the general criteria, the general rule is what I am going to explain. So in this way, a man may earn sin, which puts him to suffering and which degrades him, and in next life he may become a swine or a dog. That's what the shloka means. Uderatmanatmanam na atmanatma sadayate. Okay. Now, for one's own self is one's own friend, and for one's own self one's is enemy. Which means, if a man decides, no, I am not going to enter into this degradation of my soul, I work for upgradation of my soul. My soul has to overcome this human body and go back to Godhead. My ultimate goal is to go back to Saket, or go back to Kailasa, or go back to oneness of Brahma Jyoti, whatever it decides. So this is the upper class. So I want to upgrade myself to that process. I want to go back to Vaikuntha, or I want to go and do devotion service to my beloved God. He decides this, then naturally he has to follow certain things which will help him. So accordingly, he has to friend certain people who are in this process. Then his mind or his self is nothing but the mind, self is nothing but his intelligence, self is nothing but his body. All these three will start aligning to the idea of make friendship with such people, either through books, either through lectures, either through whatever media or whatever technology available, and he starts working on purification of own self, and hence he upgrades himself. Hence his own self becomes his friend. But for a person who is not serious about it, he doesn't want to put efforts in this. For such a person, the self, that is the Atma, that is the soul, the mind, the body, the intelligence, all starts working towards other activities. That is, his idea is, I want to somehow satisfy my senses. And who satisfy my senses? It's my wife. To satisfy my wife, I need to do certain things. So I'll do the things, whether it is correct or wrong, I don't mind. Whether it is law of the land, or whether it is against the law of the scriptures, whatever it is, against the law of the land, also I'm ready to go. And he starts doing all the sinful activities in order to satisfy his small desires. At that time, his own self, that is his own intelligence, his own body, and his own senses become his enemies, because senses are asking satisfaction of sex, and mind starts working how to do this, and intelligence will start helping him, giving ideas how to do this, and mind aligns them and body follows them, and the result is which is he will have his senses satisfied from his female or wife, but in that process he has incurred huge sins which will let him down, that is degrade to animal life. That's what it means. If a person decides what he wants, he has to adhere to the rules. So it depends upon what he decides. If he decides for upgrading, then his own self becomes his friend. If he decides to degrade, then his own self becomes his enemy. That's what it means, the shloka means. Now going back to 6.6, going forward. बन्धुरात्मनात्मस्य येनात्मैवात्मना जितः अनात्मनस्तु शत्रुत्वे वर्तमेव शत्रुत्वात्. One's own self is friend of the self by whom the lower self, consisting the mind, senses and body, has been conquered. Even for the very self of him who has not conquered his lower self behaves antagonistically like an enemy. So what I had explained here, same thing will be deeply explained, deep driven. Now, as I explained you, soul is different from the body, and the three items, that is the body consisting of legs, hands, senses, whatever. Okay, sorry. The body which consists of karmendriyas, legs, two hands, and the whole trunk of the body, the 9 holes, all these things. This becomes the body. Above them is the senses, that is the 2 eyes, nose, tongue, then the touch, feeling, and the ears. They become the senses, and the mind. So all these three are lower forms. This is the lower self. Okay. So the soul is being controlled by these three people. Okay. Now a soul who is conquered these three body parts or these three items of the self, for him these three items become friends. One, you can read the translation again. One's own self is the friend of the self by whom the lower self, consisting the mind, and body, has been conquered. If a person, example I means it may be anyone, that I, like Madhu, okay, if Madhu has conquered his senses, his mind and his body, the demands of the body, that is the hunger, the sexual desires, etc., etc., or if he's conquered his mind, the way he thinks, not to think bad, that is the six indriya, the shed repose, kama, krodha, lobha, mada, matsarya. If he has conquered, the mind has conquered this shed repose. If the senses have conquered the thirst or the neutrality of attaining, be neutral to whether you see something pleasant or something unpleasant, be neutral to what you hear, be pleasant or unpleasant, be neutral for the food what you eat, whether it is very tasteful or not, still be neutral. So if a person or the I, or in this case myself like Madhu, has conquered these three items of the self, the soul, the mind, the body and the senses, if he has conquered, then this three becomes a friend to him. But a person who has not conquered these three items, that is the senses, the body and the mind, if he is unable to conquer or control them, then they become the enemy. Because the soul, in order to satisfy these three demands of the self, here the self, see, the whole body, the owner of the body is the soul, because it's dwelling in it, and it has many departments. The body is one department, the mind is one department, the senses is one department. If he is not able to control these three departments properly, then they become their enemies. That's what this shloka means. It's just like a company has an owner and it has many branches which he has to run. Like a company may have finance department, it may have a production department, it may have a sales department, it have a HR department. The managing director of the company has to see that all these departments are under his control. If the production team is not under his control, then quality won't come up. If quality department doesn't check properly, then the products get rejected, the sales will not happen, and employees are not happy, they leave and go because of constant complaints. The HR department is so. What I mean to say is, just like a company, A managing director has to manage all his departments properly for a good productive output. Similarly, the soul, who is the managing director of this body, has to control or has to manage all these three departments: the soul, intelligence, the senses, and the parts of the body in a proper way and keep them in control so that they don't go out of control, which will affect the soul in future upgradation or degradation. That's what it means. So finally, we'll be completing today's class. The whole idea is that one has to be in control of his all the departments of the body, departments of his self, in order for him to lead an meaningful life so that he could upgrade in the future. Upgradation here means not coming up in life materially, it is upgradation of the soul. It has to evolve the soul, which is going through the 84 lakh species, from aquatic to the botanical, then moving through zoological, then coming to the reptiles, then moving to the four leg, then coming up to the two leg. Finally, he has come to the human form, and in the human form, if he works well, if he is able to understand these subjects, he can proceed future to a better evolution, free from materialistic clutches. So that is what is all happening. So all this knowledge we will try to get from Bhagavad Gita Tattva Vichettanni. So we are ending the discussions today. We will meet in the next class. Thank you very much.